I'm Kelly Hyman, and welcome to Unresolved, the Diddy cases. Tom Giuffra joins us now. He's a partner of Rheingold, Giuffra, Ruffo, Plotkin, and Hellma LLP. Tom specializes in litigation and trial of high-profile sexual abuse cases. Tom also represents alleged victims on lawsuits against P. Diddy. What are the causes of actions brought, and what elements do you need in order to prove causes of action?
Sexual assault is, as it's defined under the law, is basically a lack of consent to sexual contact. And that could be if you say no. It could be if you're intoxicated. It could be if you're drugged. So that's the basic definition of what a sexual assault is. Now, the other claim you have is sexual battery, and that means you're having contact with the sexual parts of another person, again, without their consent. So those are the two main complaints you see in a sex abuse, sex assault type case with any, it's not unique to Sean Combs. It's same allegations were made against Harvey Weinstein or any of the other high profile, or even the cases involving people you'd ever heard of.
And where are you in regards to the civil cases, and what evidence do you present in the civil cases?
Well, the where we are, and one of the things they say about the wheels of justice is they tend to be kind of slow. And when there's a companion criminal case going on at the same time, it makes it even slower. So we're in the very early days of discovery, which is the exchange of information regarding our client and the information we're trying to get from Combs's people. But it's a slow process, and it's very early days on that. And that's typical for any civil case. Unfortunately, the court systems take their time, and the lawyers, frankly, take their time as well. And when it's complicated with a pending criminal case, the court systems on the civil side let the brakes kind of be tamped down. Like, for example, during the Harvey Weinstein trial, or his case was going on, I had represented one of the victims, and I was one of the only lawyers who did any depositions. I did Bob Weinstein, and the one person I didn't do was Harvey, because he had a pending case against him, and certainly the court wasn't going to let me ask questions that could be prejudicial to him in the context of my civil case. So it's kind of par for the course on civil cases.
Can you use the evidence in P. Diddy's criminal case in your civil case?
If he's convicted, I think you can, yes. I mean, if he's convicted, which I think he will be, the fact that he's convicted of these same crimes that are being alleged in the civil cases certainly is admissible evidence, and it wouldn't be prejudicial to him because he's had the actual conviction. Now, if he didn't have the conviction and he was found not guilty, well, that would be prejudicial because everybody's considered innocent. So that's the distinction, I would think, in how you would be able to use it. And they're really case specific. I mean, every single abuse case is different. The facts, the circumstances, they're all different. And I don't think it's any different in these cases.
Why do you think he'll be convicted?
Well, I do know the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. I do know their conviction rate is something like 96%. I've read the indictments. I can read the tea leaves pretty well as to what the indictments mean. And the fact that he's not been given bail is pretty telling. Based on that, I think the likelihood is he's going to get convicted.
For your civil cases representing the alleged victims, is it better for you that the jury comes back with a guilty verdict or not guilty?
100% better if he's found guilty, because then it's admissible. And there's no question the conviction would be admissible in New York courts if he's convicted for a sex abuse or a sex crime. that would certainly be admissible. It's not prejudicial because he's then been adjudicated a felon. He's at a full and fair opportunity. And again, in the criminal context, the standard of proof is much higher than it is in a civil context.
And so what is the difference, the burden of proof in regards to the criminal cases versus the civil cases?
Okay, that's a good question. So everybody's familiar with what it is in criminal. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's the criminal standard, which is 99 and 9/10 likely. Civil is a lot different because civil cases is what's called more likely than not. And so what that would mean is if you have two scales of justice, if it's tilted up just a little bit more in favor of the plaintiff or a little bit more in favor of the defendant, that side wins. So it's a lesser standard of proof.
And in regards to your civil cases, what type of compensation are you seeking and what kind of damages are you asserting in these cases?
Well, every single one of them are significant money. If you're asking me for a dollar amount, I couldn't give it to you now, but I would say it would be significant compensation because every single one of my cases involve rapes. Every single one of them deals with the psychological impact of rapes, and my experience has been it's tremendous to have to undergo this, and it's a lifelong thing, and the trauma that goes along with it doesn't go away. It can get worse, it can get better, it ebbs and flows. There are triggers in life where somebody who's a survivor of sexual abuse just can't function. It's very difficult for relationships, it's very difficult for trust. It's very challenging. Physical injuries are hard enough. Mental injuries related to sexual abuse, in some ways, can be far worse and far more debilitating.
And can you explain to the viewers the statute of limitations? There's been a lot of discussion, especially in New York, about statute of limitations in regards to bringing these types of cases.
Okay, statute of limitations that with sex abuse cases have come a long way. In the past, the statute of limitations in New York for rape was 1 year. And one thing we know with victims of sexual abuse and survivors is the shame and the fact that they kind of can't come to terms with the fact of making this public and coming to somebody's office like mine and sharing something to them that was so emotionally devastating. And over time, as we've become more sophisticated as a society and become more knowledgeable of the impact, they've recognized this effect. So they've extended the statute of limitations for sex crimes, for civil cases. And then what they did is they said, well, it's not really very fair for the people who only had the 1 year statute of limitations. And they did what they called windows, look back windows, which enabled people to file lawsuits for crimes that happened or events that happened, 10, 15, 20 years ago to give that person the opportunity that they would have had today. So that's where the statute of limitations have changed. Now, in New York, we had something called the Adult Survivors Act where they opened the window, which is what we call it, for a year. Now, for New York City has a different law and it's called the Gender Motivated Violence Act. And that window was a 2-year window, which just recently closed. And that enabled people who had been the victims of sex abuse or sex assault in New York to sue their abusers civilly. So that window just closed.
Since that window closed, is there any way a victim could pursue the cases, or is there no opportunity for them now that the window is closed?
It depends when in time the abuse occurred. If it was something like 10 years ago, longer than that, I would would be my answer. Because, for example, mine were cases in 2020, 2019, and there's less of a statute problem. But if you're going back 2000s, 2010, there would be a problem. It's really date specific and location specific.
Why would someone with P. Diddy's fame, status, allegedly do something like this?
That's a very good question. People who have power, money, fame, they get whatever they want. They can go to the best restaurants. They could spool up their private jet, go to the Riviera. People who are like you and I, we could go out, have a nice dinner with our family, and that gives us the rush and makes us happy, right? But for somebody who has so much and so much power and so things like that become meaningless. I use the analogy, it's like buying a bottle of water for them, something that would be meaningful for us, because a big vacation for us is their life. So some people can live with that, and that's fine. And there are some people that to get that jolt, that feeling of, I don't know what the word is, but that feeling that you get of satisfaction, they sometimes go down a dark path. And based on what you hear about, for example, like a Harvey Weinstein, for example, he didn't need to be doing all these things he was doing. And yet, to get his rush, he had to go down that dark path. Same thing with like a Bill Cosby. They need to get the rush that they don't get from ordinary things like I would, for example, for playing a good round of golf would give me a good feeling, a good rush for a while. But for somebody like this, with all the power, with all the people who are just yes menning and just nobody putting limits, some people go down this path.
Talking about the cases in which you brought against P. Diddy and only discussing what is available on the public record, can you give us kind of an overview of the different types of cases that you brought and what it entails?
Well, all three of them involved rape. All three of them involved rape of men. Two were situations where I think probably fall into the whole idea of his sexual practices, of needing to get a rush. One involves somebody who worked for him that he wasn't paying. And I think that was more of well, they're always power, but this was more to assert dominance over him. So that one was different than the other two.
It seems like a theme for your lawsuits is power. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, yeah. They're always about power. Rape, sexual abuse has nothing to do with sex or anything like that. It's to assert dominance over another human being. There's nothing else involved in rape or sexual abuse. There's nothing sexual about it. It's just to assert dominance. It's to assert power. It's to demean somebody else. And that's what it's all about. People think it has nothing to do with sex. I mean, it's a sexual act, but it's just to abuse somebody. It's to assert dominance. It's to assert power. And one of my client who used to work with him, he put it best. He said, he used the term, he wanted to make me his bitch. And I mean, it's not my words, it was his words. And it was just to assert the power that he was in charge, he was the boss, and he had the control.
And how do you prove such a case? Because then it can potentially boil down to a he said, she said type of thing.
Well, every single one of these cases, for the most part, are he said, she says. It's a question of credibility. Who's more believable? For example, with these cases, we had probably 100 calls, and we have a pretty strict criteria of the cases that we'll take, because it's a big process to make these kinds of allegations against somebody. And frankly, out of the overwhelming majority of these people, they didn't fit the pattern. The stories were fantastic and just didn't make any sense. So we never got involved in them, and we rejected them out of hand. And I think that's what you have to do with these cases, because once you decide to go down this path, you have to believe in it. And we have a very strict criteria of what we'll take and what we won't take. And I talk to the clients, and sometimes I don't. I mean, I can't say I spoke to over 100 people. I had my associate who spoke with them, and one of my partners, and the ones that they thought passed their test got on to me. And if they passed my test, then we would continue. And frankly, only 3 went the distance.
Now, are there's 3 that went the distance? Are these going to be tried in front of a jury or a judge?
Absolutely in front of a jury.
And what would be the makeup of the jury? Of how many people and how many do you need to win your case?
Okay, so in New York, it's a jury of 6. And in New York, the rules are you don't have to have a unanimous jury. You could have 5 out of 6, and that would be the makeup of the jury. So if for example, if we convince 5 out of these 6 people, we win. If his defense team convinces 5 out of the 6 people, they win, or it could be unanimous. But in New York, it's very. I've tried a lot of cases, and I would say, 75%. It's a 5-1 decision, at least in my experience.
We appreciate your time. Is there
Sure.
anything else you think that the viewers would want to know?
Well, I think you have to keep an open mind about these things. I anticipate with the criminal trial, one of the things you'll hear is that everything's consensual, and these people wanted to be there. They wanted to be part of his universe, and that's the usual thing. When you do the kind of work I do, you hear from a defense lawyer, you hear one of two things. One is, A, it never happened and my client is lying, or B, it happened, but it was consensual. And so that's kind of the stand. One thing I've never heard is, yes, my client abused your client. That has never happened. But you have to have kind of the view of a case like this. It's not going to be very clear cut. It's because one of the great mysteries and the myths of the world is that most rapes occur where somebody's stalking somebody in the street. And there are statistics on this, and only 15% of all rapes involve strangers. The balance of them are either intimate partners or acquaintances. So jurors need to, and people need to understand, it's not as clear cut as some guy in a raincoat tracking somebody as they're walking home. It's much more gray. And I think they're going to be relying on the gray and saying, these people wanted to be in his world, they wanted to be in this universe, but that's not necessarily what it is, because control works in a lot of ways. Control works in power. Control works in manipulation. So I think that's the road they're going to go down, and it's going to be up to the U.S. attorney to kind of establish and show that it's not black and white. It's very gray, and I think a juror will understand it.
Do you need consent for human trafficking? Is that a factor or element in it for the criminal case?
No, I'm talking about more the rapes. I think in human trafficking, there's different varieties of human trafficking. I mean, the classic one is a runaway is snatched by a criminal gang and put in a room somewhere. But there are also cases where, and I've handled them, where, for example, some very wealthy person reaches out to a woman and says, "Hey, I want to start a relationship. Come meet me in, Aspen." And all of a sudden, the passports are taken away, and they're stuck in a life that they didn't anticipate. And that can happen, and that does happen all the time. I mean, you go to a place where there are wealthy people. You go to Monaco. You go to Saint-Tropez. This stuff goes on all the time. So there's the classic cage that we would expect. And then there's the gilded cage that maybe you don't expect, where somebody is, well, they're not chained up in a room somewhere, but effectively they are, through the manipulation, but through the same tactics. Taking the passport, that's a classic, no matter what kind of trafficking it is. But it's not the usual trafficking that people think. Just like rape is not the way rape works in the real world.
Tom, thank you so much for your time and your insight. We really appreciate it and wish you the best of luck in your lawsuits.
All right, Kelly, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Let's bring in attorneys Michelle Dordick and Katrina Eiden, who are representing alleged victims of P. Diddy. Thank you guys so much for your time. How many civil cases are you handling?
Currently, we have 5 cases.
And what causes of action brought, and what are the elements to prove these causes of action?
Sure. So we're bringing sexual battery, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, as well as negligence. When it comes to battery, of course, that's touch with an intent to cause harm, where the plaintiff did not consent to that touching, the plaintiff was harmed, and the defendant was the substantial factor in causing that harm. For false imprisonment, it means that the plaintiff was deprived of their ability to move. They didn't consent to it. It wasn't voluntary. And the defendant conduct was a substantial factor again in causing the plaintiff's harm. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, that's outrageous conduct on behalf of the defendant, where the defendant intended to cause the infliction of emotional harm, and it was a substantial factor, and the plaintiff was harmed.
And so for this intentional infliction of emotional stress, outrageous behavior, can you give the viewers kind of some examples of what qualifies as outrageous behavior?
Sure. In terms of outrageous behavior in this context, it's the drugging, it's the giving of alcohol, it's honestly the signing of non-disclosure agreements, and then of course the misconduct itself.
And can you explain to the viewers what is a non-disclosure agreement?
Sure. So a non-disclosure agreement is an agreement between at least two people who sign a waiver before they go to a party, in this case, where they agree to not tell anybody the information or what happened at that event.
And if someone signs this and tells their story, couldn't there be some issues with potential lawsuits against them for breaching this type of agreement?
Yes, I mean, that's exactly what the agreement is for, is to bind somebody against speaking about it, or else they can be sued for typically a lot of money.
But in this context specifically, you know, we hold that, you know, all of these NDAs are unconscionable. They're non-enforceable because, you know, you can't consent to a crime. And you know, for drugs, you know, drinking, you know, illicit dancing, sure, that would be a purpose of a non-disclosure agreement. But when it comes to being sexually assaulted, that goes beyond what one would think of when they're signing this non-disclosure agreement.
And as you said, this non-disclosure agreement, a lot of people know it as an NDA agreement, right?
Exactly.
And so in the cases that you are going to file against P. Diddy, what are some of the damages that you would be seeking in these types of cases?
So, monetary, in a civil lawsuit, we sometimes say it's unfortunate that the only thing we can get for our clients is money. And that's unfortunate because oftentimes for them, it's not about the money. What they really want is their opportunity to be heard, their opportunity to be believed. And, you know, sometimes even just an apology or recognition of what the other person did. But yeah, in these cases, what we can get them is money, and it doesn't fix the problem. It doesn't make the problem go away, but it can help. And we do our best to get them every single penny that they deserve.
Now, would you file these type of cases in civil court, criminal court?
So we're civil attorneys. So we're going to be filing it in civil court. We'll let the prosecutors handle the criminal cases.
And would you file those in state court or federal court?
So, I mean, for us, we believe that filing it in state court is better. You know, that's more our wheelhouse. And honestly, it's more favorable for the plaintiffs.
And can you use the evidence in the criminal case in your civil lawsuits?
We can. The difficulty is getting the evidence from the criminal case. But once we have it, if it's relevant and it's admissible and we can have, you know, we can we can achieve everything that we need through the rules of evidence, then there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to use it in our cases. So yeah.
It can make our cases stronger too. You know, if there's testimony that comes out, then, you know, we can use it to possibly impeach someone if they say something different, when their deposition comes around.
Is it better for the criminal cases that the jury comes back with guilty, or if it comes back not guilty?
So first, there is a bit of a difference between criminal cases and civil cases and their burden of proof. The burden of proof in criminal cases is higher. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. For civil cases, it's a preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, 50% plus a feather. So if it's found guilty in a higher, you know, burden of proof court, I think that would weigh very favorably for us. But if he's found not guilty, which I don't think is going to be the case, but if he is found not guilty, again, it's a higher standard, and we're seeking different causes of actions. So it may taint our case a little bit, but it's not going to hinder us from being able to get our jobs done.
Right, so there's a benefit, or it's helpful to us if he's found guilty, but it's not necessarily that harmful to us if he's not found guilty because of that standard of proof.
What would you want our viewers to take away from these cases?
You know, I think something that is really important for the public to see is the bravery that our clients have in coming forward with their stories. We have represented a lot of victims of sexual assault, and every single time the story of what encouraged them to come forward was it took a lot. And it tells me that there are a lot of victims that probably have not come forward. And so I'm really hoping that first and foremost, that any victims of sexual abuse can feel some sort of confidence to come forward, seeing how much these women have been able to overcome whatever barriers they had to come forward themselves.
Are you looking for a judgment by a jury or a judge?
We are looking for, these cases will be held in front of a jury. So they will be jury trials.
And this will be in California State Court, correct?
Yes.
And so in California, do you need a unanimous jury?
No, in state court, it only requires us to have 9 of the 12 juries vote in our favor.
And maybe you could touch on this a little bit about, people talk about statute of limitations, how long you need to bring a cause of action. Can you give our viewers kind of an overview in regards to California about these types of cases?
Yes, so it's a little, yes. So in California, there are statutes of limitations for regular sexual assault, which are 10 years from the date of the incident if you're over the age of 18. If you are a minor at the time of the incident, then it's 40 years to bring your cause of action.
Or till you reach the age of 40. It's a very complicated area, the statute of limitations for sexual assault cases in the civil realm, because it was recently extended after the Me Too movement. So it first depends on whether you were a minor or an adult at the time of the abuse. And then if it happened, I think before 2024, after 2024, it's constantly changing. So it is very complicated, but they have extended it.
And you hear in the news about these civil cases against P. Diddy in New York, cases against P. Diddy in California. Is there a particular reason why that you guys are going to plan to file your lawsuits in California rather than New York or another state? And if so, can you kind of explain to the viewers so that they understand why you're filing in California rather than New York or Florida or something along those lines?
So all of our cases, all of the incidents actually occurred here in California. So that's primarily the reason why we're doing it here, as well as the defendant Diddy having a home here, so that we can, you know, do it here in Los Angeles.
So you're doing, since he has a home there because he has a domicile and the court would allegedly have jurisdiction over him because of that, or is it jurisdiction because of the incidents occurred in California?
Both. You know, his domicile being here as well as the incident being here makes it a lot harder for the defendant to try to remove the case to federal court.
And why would someone remove the case to federal court?
So in terms of federal court, the rules are a lot different. You know, so in terms of a jury, you have to be found, it has to be unanimous verdict, meaning that everybody has to agree that, you know, Diddy did the harm here. And so the defendant may want to move it to federal court because it's a lot harder to get that verdict.
That's really good information to know. Thank you guys, Michelle, Katrina, for your time. Is there anything else that you guys would like to add before we once again say thank you so much?
You know, I think that we stand firmly behind our clients, and we will do anything and everything that we can to get justice for them.
I couldn't have said it better.
Well, thank you guys so much for fighting the good fight. Thank you again for your time, Michelle and Katrina, and we really appreciate you and what you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you so much for watching. Tune in to our next episode.